Hey, you guys in social media land, we had a little glitch right there, and now we're just trying to see if we can. We had to restart things, so I'm trying to see if it'll all restart. There we go. I believe we're started now. So if you're just now coming in on Facebook, we had a little glitch right there. Something didn't have it for some reason didn't want to get us out there, but we're out there now. Thank you very much. I think that might have been Ken. Let me see. Yeah, Ken, thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks for getting me hooked up on Facebook. Now we're ready to go. So we're talking about, you guys have just joined us, we're talking about fructose and glucose metabolism, and I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to pick up where we left off last night, and we're just going to go for it right here. So we were talking about what happens when you eat like a piece of bread, right? Like what is the mechanism that's going on inside the body? And what we know about eating bread, rice, pasta, bread, is glucose. Okay, there's not unless they add some sort of sugar to it. That what you're going to get, you can look it up, and you can look at your, you can look inside your ingredients list. As long as there's no sugar, then what you're getting from these type of refined starches, your bread, your pasta, your rice, is you're getting glucose. It's breaking itself down. It goes through your intestines, and you end up with glucose in your bloodstream. And glucose is going to be spread out to all the cells in your body. And only a very tiny percentage of it, 20% of it, is going to end up getting to your liver. And that's what the picture is that we're going over here, is this what happens when it gets to your liver? What happens to glucose when it gets to your liver? And this is what we went over last night. We went over that there's going to be a certain percentage that gets broken down and stored as glycogen. And glycogen is just glucose that's transformed so that you can put it in storage. It's kind of like what you do with your sweaters at the end of the winter. Maybe you put them in a tub and put them in the attic, or put them in the top of your closet, or whatever you do, right? You take your winter clothes and you just store it for next year when you need them again. And that's kind of what glycogen is. Glycogen is that storage of glucose. So glucose is energy. What you do is you take glucose and you transform it down into this product called pyruvate, and then you stick it in the mitochondria, and it makes ATP, and that's the fuel that your cell runs on. That's why the mitochondria is so important, to make sure that you protect that mitochondria and not get any mitochondrial dysfunction. And we've read an article about that before, about what is mitochondrial dysfunction and how many different things that shows up when you have mitochondrial dysfunction. So it's very important to keep that mitochondria going, because that mitochondria is what's going to make your power. So you eat some white bread, you eat a little pasta, you eat some rice. The majority of that is going to go spread out. Now, the one thing that you do have to understand is that it's very important to understand the mechanisms and the goals that you're trying to solve. Too much of that blood sugar is not good. Constantly having this up and down and up and down and up and down with your glucose in your bloodstream is not healthy for you. I'm not saying that it is, okay? What I am saying is that it's diffuse, it's going to be spread out, only a very small portion is going to get to your liver, and then you're going to transform. Not only are you going to make glucose, but you're also going to make pyruvate. But there's a step in the middle of this pyruvate. When you take glucose 6-phosphate, so glucose 6P, and then you take this glycogen synthase, and that's going to make your glycogen, but instead you kick glucose 6P over here and you make fructose 6P, and then you transfer that into this product called fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Now, I know it's complicated. Don't lose me on this still. But in between those two steps, there's a little enzyme, PFK, phosphofructokinase, okay? Phosphofructokinase, this PFK, is going to tell you whether or not it wants you to move this fructose 6-phosphate down the chain. It's going to turn on like you turn on your lights. If you're going to do something in your office, turn on your lights so you can see, right? If you want to make more pyruvate, you turn on your PFK right there. So the things that are affecting PFK, the things that turn it off, number one is, are you already full of energy? ATP. If you've got high levels of energy, then you don't have to make any more of that. You can stop the process right there. If you have high levels of citrate, that's another one. It's like, whoa, no, we don't need any more of that. Don't add any more of this to the mitochondria. We've already got that, plenty of it. It's going to downregulate that, and then hydrogen ions, and that's going to those things are all going to decrease your PFK. And then there's things that turn on, like AMP instead of ATP. That's going to mean it's like, oh, wow, we need more ATP, so this PFK is going to turn on. And the reason I'm telling you this is this. There's a regulator in glucose metabolism in the liver. There's a step, there's a governor, like on an engine. There's a thermostat kind of situation that you'll see when you are working with glucose. There's a regulator that we can turn it on and we can turn it off. If we need more power, more ATP, we'll turn it on. If we need less ATP, we can turn it off, okay? So we can regulate it. Glucose is able to be highly regulated. It's going to create very little citrate. It's going to create very little VLDL. It's going to create very little triglycerides. It's going to be used in the periphery, in the muscle. That's where lots of that 80% is going to go. So it's going to go into the muscle. It's going to be stored in the muscle. Regular levels of glucose won't overload the mitochondria. We're going to be good in our TCA cycle. We're going to be able to handle all that, and it's going to be pretty sound and pretty safe for our health. And it's going to be relatively safe for our liver. It's going to be responsive to insulin. It's going to decrease gluconeogenesis, which is we're not going to be pumping new glucose into the bloodstream all night long. We're going to be able to handle things better if we are processing glucose. Okay? Now, watch what happens. Watch what happens when we change the screen and we start looking at fructose. Let's see if I can find it. I got it in here somewhere. Hang on. There we go. All right. Now look what happens when we add fructose. And let me blow it up so you can see it. Maybe you can see it a little bit better right here. Okay? Now, just a reminder before I get too much further into this whole thing, this is coming from Robert Lustig in his conversation where he talked to Low Carb Down Under. It's on YouTube. It's what Robert Lustig taught me. This is not me teaching anything, and this is me breaking down a video that I did on Saturday. I found the video, I broke it down, I copied it all. It's all copied, plagiarized. All this is all that. Okay, It's not authentic. It's what Dr. Lustig taught me, and I'm just trying to teach you. So that's all this is. Okay. So I'm using a lot of his language, and I'm using a lot of his examples and all that sort of thing too. So, but we're adding our own little touch to it. But look what happens. Look what happens when fructose is taken in. Okay, so what we said that if we ate a piece of bread and it had 100 calories of glucose, that only 20 calories of glucose hit the liver, right? But after the first pass, and after whatever's going to get taken off the top in the intestine, when you drink a Coke, or when you drink orange juice, or when you drink Maker's Mark whiskey, whatever those calories are that are all coming from that fructose, like you juiced an apple and you have a whole glass full of apple juice, that's straight fructose. Okay? So now, let's say you take 100 calories you get 100 calories of fructose. You're going to have a little bit taken off the top, and then 100% of what's left, the majority, almost 100% of what's left is going to go to it's going to hit the liver. Now it's going to hit the liver cell. Okay, so there's a difference. There's a little bit of math on this, but if you have 100 calories of glucose, you end up with 20 calories hitting your liver. If you have 100 calories of fructose, you end up with 100 calories, give or take a little bit, that hits your liver. It's an overload of the liver process right from the beginning. What we're doing right from the beginning is we're hitting it with too much. It's overloading the liver. And you say, okay, well, what if it was sugar? What if it was the Pop-Tart or the Frosted Flakes or the donut that we decided to have for breakfast? Let's say that let's look at that for just a second before we go any further. Let's look at what if we were to have 100 calories of sugar? So we're getting 100 calories there. Well, what is that? That's 50 calories of glucose and then 50 calories of fructose. Okay, now you got to give me that first pass chain. So it's not these numbers are not identical. But what you'll end up with is 20% of 50 is 10, isn't it? So you get 10 of these calories goes to the liver, but then you get all of these calories, 50, that goes to the liver. So the combination on the liver here is 60 calories. So if you're drinking something with sugar in it, you're drinking sweet tea. You're drinking sweet tea, and you're putting those calories. And let's look it up right quick, because I don't know it off the top of my head, but calories in a teaspoon of sugar. Okay, so there are approximately 16 calories in 1 teaspoon of sugar. So you can do the math of however many teaspoons of sugar you put in your sweet tea. So you can figure up how much that is, and then you can do this same math of where you're getting that. But when you add that, that's the load that you're getting to the liver. Okay, you're getting 10 calories of glucose, but you're getting the 50 calories of the fructose minus the first pass that's going through there. All right, so we're overloading the liver with fructose. So what happens when we do that? What's going to actually happen in the liver? Well, the first thing that Dr. Lustig was talking about, first thing he pointed out was, look at the picture right here and see if you can find glycogen. And the answer is that you don't. You don't find glycogen when you put the fructose into the liver, because it's not going to change it. What it's going to do is it's going to act upon the fructose, and you're going to get this fructokinase, and you're immediately going to get the fructose 1-phosphate. See, that's what we had a while ago, and when we were, look at it again. When we were, and I know you guys on the radio are having a hard time with this, but just listen to it, and maybe you can go to the other page. But look what happens right here. See, we get this fructose 6-phosphate, and then it gets pushed down through the process. That's what happened to glucose. Glucose 6-phosphate to fructose 6-phosphate, right? So we got that fructose in there. Now, if we add fructose metabolism, now look what happens. Now we're just making that into this fructose, and then we're moving it down the chain. And so we're taking all of it. We're not taking just a little bit of it. We're not splitting it up and sending some of it to glycogen to store for later. We're just taking all of it right now, and we're dumping it into the mitochondria. We're overloading the mitochondria now with 100% of that, whatever gets in there, it's going through the process, right? So let's follow it. It's going to go to fructose. It's going to go through this. It's going to move down to this dihydroxyacetone phosphate, glyceraldehyde, and it's going to keep on moving down. There's your PFK again a little bit, but it's not. It's in the a different process. It's going to move it down. You're going to get pyruvate. So what you're getting now as you move down the chain is you're getting a very large amount of pyruvate going into the mitochondria, and you're getting almost no regulation at all of turning it off. You got no thermostat now. So you drink your Coke, you drink your sweet tea, you eat your Pop-Tart, you take your donut, and what you're doing is you're flooding the liver with fructose, and now the fructose is flooding the mitochondria with pyruvate. So remember what we talked about. When it goes in there and it goes into the TCA cycle and it gets turned into citrate, and then it gets turned into isocitrate, and there's too much in there, that reverses. And so it reverses it back to the citrate and kicks it out. So now look what happens. So we go through the process, it kicks it out as citrate, then it goes back to acetyl-CoA, and then we get a lipid droplet. We get a fat droplet that gets developed right here, and there's the beginning stages of your fatty liver disease. It's because that citrate was overloaded. We couldn't keep pumping the wheel. We couldn't turn the wheel. We had too much of the substrate in the wheel in the mitochondria. So we're overloading the mitochondria. We're creating this free radical nightmare that's going on in the mitochondria. It's like, holy crap! Like we're just what are we doing here, right? And then when it kicks it out as citrate, now we got two problems going on. Number one, it's going to get kicked off into this lipid droplet. Number two, it's going to get pushed on. We actually got three problems. It's going to keep pushed on through the process to where here comes our ApoB again, and now we're going to kick it up into VLDLs. And what's going to happen is VLDLs are going to get pushed out into triglycerides, which is going to go up because we've got so much of it. It's an overload issue. So you just throw it in there. Now you kick it out, and you got to kick it out. You got to do something with it. You can't just leave it in there. So what happens? You go get your blood work done, and your triglycerides are high. You're supposed to be 150 or less. My triglycerides are 36. It's like why? Because I don't eat fructose very much. We eat berries instead of fruit, right? We don't drink fruit juice. We don't drink sweet tea that's sweetened with sugar. We don't drink sodas with fructose. We stay away from sugar. It's like, okay, where's my fructose coming from? It's coming from a random crazy bite of something that I'm not paying attention to, or it's coming from a piece of fruit maybe every once in a while. Eat a pineapple, or maybe I have some grapes a little bit. But how many people just argue all the time for their grapes and their bananas and it's like, I eat a banana every day. I eat a banana with peanut butter on it every day. And I'm like, okay, what's your blood work? What's happening to you? My blood work is fine. My triglycerides are fine. Everything is fine. Great, no problem. Keep doing what you're doing. You got no problems, right? We don't need to make a problem out of nothing. You may be exercising so much that you're just running your system so fast that you're using up all this ATP all the time that you don't even have a problem at all. And you're just kicking that through your mitochondria and sending it out the other side. Like you're a professional athlete, you're a marathon runner, you're whatever you are, and you're measuring this in your blood, right? You're maintaining it, you're watching it, and you're saying, okay, I don't have an insulin problem. I don't have a glucose problem. I don't have an HbA1c problem. I don't have a triglyceride problem. I don't have an LDL problem. Nothing. Okay, if that's you, congratulations. You're a very strange person in the society, but you're doing great. So just keep on doing what you're doing, right? We don't need to apply this to every single person. We're talking about health and trying to keep people healthy. But there's a lot of us out there who've spent a lot of our lives drinking Cokes. and eating ice cream and having Pop-Tarts for breakfast and eating donuts, right? I'm not the only one. And if I am the only one, I'm just talking to myself then, right? It's like, if that's the case, then that'd be great. So, so no, there we go. We're good. So, yeah. Hang on one second, man. I think we're. Yeah, there we go. We got a break coming up. You guys just stick around with me. If this is making sense, stay with me. We're going to keep going, and you're going to see even more of this on the other side of the break. We'll be right back. Okay. Sorry, we have a little technical glitch, and you're trying to talk about biochemistry and all of these breakdowns and how this whole thing works. So when I say to you that joint degeneration is a combination of abnormal biomechanics, life movement, abnormal movement patterns is number one. Okay, number two is biochemistry. When I say that, when I say that to you, that degeneration is caused from two things. It's not just caused from abnormal movement, but it's also caused from a combination of abnormal movement and abnormal chemistry. And when I say that, this is exactly what I'm talking about. When I say abnormal chemistry, this is it right here. Because I'm going to show you the next thing that we're going to see is how we get junk 1 involved and we see inflammation. And now it's like we're starting to kick in all these mechanisms. There's your uric acid that we talked a little bit about yesterday. And so your gout, people talk about your gout, right? And your increased levels of uric acid. We're going to show you how that happens. We're going to show you how you decrease nitric oxide and you get increased blood pressure. And it's like all that right there is chemistry. And we don't want to learn chemistry. Like 8 of us learned. There's 7 in our senior class, right? Junior and senior class. Did y'all pay attention to chemistry? I didn't pay any attention to chemistry. It's like, don't burn yourself with a Bunsen burner and try not to blow up the lab. And everything else, I was like, I don't even understand what he's talking about. Get to chiropractic, go through undergraduate and study chemistry and biochemistry. I didn't pay attention to any of that stuff. Why? I was too immature and it was complicated and I had to actually work at it a little bit. And I was too busy doing other things that were more important to me. And I'm like, what do I have to worry about chemistry for? Like, what difference does it make? And then all of a sudden it's like, holy cow. It's like how the whole entire world runs. It's chemistry. Hang on, let me get us back on the radio. Okay, everybody, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. We are breaking down fructose metabolism tonight, and we are in the liver at the moment. We are talking about what's happening. We're drinking a glass of orange juice. We're eating an apple. We're drinking sweet tea. We're eating Pop-Tarts and a donut and Frosted Flakes. You think about this for a second. Just stop. Just everybody stop and think about this for 1 second. We're feeding our children Pop-Tarts and Frosted Flakes and Lucky Charms and all those other things full of sugar before we send them to school. It's like, what in the heck are we thinking? What are we doing? Why would we buy another deal of Pop-Tarts? Like, why would we buy or any sort of form of Pop-Tarts, right? Like, what are we trying to do? We're just loading up their livers with fructose, right? And some of that fructose is going to get turned into pyruvate. A large volume of it is going to get turned into pyruvate, and it's going to overload the mitochondria, and it's going to increase free radicals in the mitochondria. It's going to cause mitochondrial damage. It's going to kick out of the mitochondria as citrate, run up the thing. One of the things that's going to happen right there is it's going to be kicked out, that acetyl-CoA is going to be kicked out into a free fatty acid. And now we've got this peripheral problem out there because now we get muscle insulin resistance because we got triglyceridemia. We got too many triglycerides in the bloodstream, and now we've got this dyslipidemia going on, and we get muscle insulin resistance. So now when we want to eat the white bread and we want to eat the think about what like a McDonald's, you eat a Big Mac and fries and drink a Coke, or you eat a pizza and a Coke, right? What are you doing? You're eating the pizza that's full of sugar and glucose from the bread, right? And then half the sugar is going to go over to the Coke side where you got the high fructose corn syrup, which is 42 or 55 or 95% fructose. Most of it's 55% fructose. So that fructose is now getting overloaded. And what are we doing? We're making the muscles respond to the glucose load, and we're kicking it back out of the liver again in the form of free fatty acids that's now causing problems in the muscles and making them insulin resistant. Now our muscles are not responding to insulin, and we need those for this whole process. We need to be responsive to insulin, and now we wonder, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on with me, right? Okay, that's one part of it. Now let's look at the part of fructose that doesn't go down into pyruvate. What else would happen to this fructose in this whole thing? Well, one of the things is it's going to get with this little JNK1 enzyme or kinase or whatever this thing is. Now we're going to get inflammation. We're going to increase our inflammation. So now not only do we have an insulin-resistant liver, but we also have an inflamed liver. Now our inflammation is high. So what's going to happen with that? It's going to cross over here, and it's going to basically run right through the middle of the insulin process that's inside the liver. Now you've got this JNK1 that's running across, and it's just basically tackling the mechanism, just crashing its car right into the mechanism of insulin inside the liver. And what do we get? We get liver insulin resistance because of this overload that's going on right there. And because we got this insulin liver, you remember in the glucose model where we said when the insulin kicked in, it turned off the gluconeogenesis, and now we're not able to kick out any of that stored glycogen that we have in our liver because it blocks that. It stops the gluconeogenesis. Well, look what happens here. Now, this process doesn't get stopped because the inflammation in the JNK1 crashed into the insulin mechanism, and so it wasn't able to come over here and stop gluconeogenesis. So now gluconeogenesis goes up, and so now we're dumping more glucose into the bloodstream. That's what I was talking about last night, but right at the end of the show, where it said they make diabetics check their blood sugar first thing in the morning. You're checking your blood sugar, and you wake up in the morning and your blood sugar is at 300, and you're trying to you can't figure out why it's at 300. It's like, what? I didn't eat anything. I didn't eat anything all night long. I didn't eat anything since supper last night. Well, what happened when you ate supper? Your insulin went up. Your blood sugar, glucose went up. Then your insulin followed it, and then that helped bring that whole process down. And then what was supposed to happen is insulin was supposed to stop all this. Now it brought it down, and then your pancreas released glucagon, and I don't think I'm going over that tonight. But then your pancreas told your liver, hey, you need to make more glucose because we've run out of it. So the glucose starts making it. But what tells the liver to stop gluconeogenesis? It's the insulin. But you're now insulin resistant. What does it mean? It means that your liver is not listening to insulin. It's not responding to it. Nothing happens. The insulin hits the liver cell, and it's like we turned the light switch on, but nothing happened. It was like it was just no response. And so what happens? Now we dump glucose all night long into our bloodstream. And what happens? We get centripetal obesity. So not only are we getting increased obesity around our visceral organs, but we're also getting an increase in obesity inside of our liver in the form of this lipid droplet right there. So those are the three things that are happening down below, but now we've got inflammation, and now the inflammation is flooding the whole thing. Now we're getting uric acid. So here's another thing. We're going to get an increased amount of uric acid, which is going to block nitric oxide. And we need nitric oxide to help us with our blood pressure. So now our blood pressure is going to go up because the endothelial lining of our blood vessels are going to constrict, and now we're going to get an increased amount of blood pressure. If you don't understand what that means, put your thumb on the end of a water hose. When you put your thumb on the end of a water hose, you increase the pressure of the water moving through the hose because you decrease the diameter that the water had to exit the hose. Same thing happens in blood pressure. You decrease the diameter of your blood vessel, and what do? You get an increased amount of blood pressure. So, and part of that is happening because of this process of fructose metabolism inside the liver. There's just a whole bunch of this stuff that's going on that's causing all kinds of trouble. So Yang et al., I wrote this down in a different article, found liver-specific knockdown of JNK1 resulted in a 57% decrease in insulin and a 16% decrease of glucose. And they did it in mice. If they figured out a way to create mice that they could kill off this JNK1 enzyme, kinase, whatever it is, if they could get rid of JNK1, they decreased insulin by 57% and they decreased glucose by 16%. Do you see it? You see why? Because if they get rid of junk, now insulin doesn't have, you're not crashing into the insulin mechanism, so you're able to stop gluconeogenesis and you can decrease glucose into the bloodstream. It's like, oh, now we don't need insulin, now we don't need glucose. And it's like, wait a minute, this all happened because I was drinking orange juice and apple juice and fructose and high fructose corn syrup and Dr. Pepper and Sprite and Coca-Cola and all the rest of those things, and I was eating a bowl of ice cream and I had my cookies and I did all the things with sugar, and I was so addicted to sugar, and it's like all this stuff was happening to me. And why was I addicted to sugar? Because I up and to the right and over to the left, and I had decreased function in the left hemisphere of my brain, and I was lacking dopamine, so I needed something to make me feel good so that the life didn't suck. And in the process of all that, I created fatty liver disease for myself, insulin resistance, diabetes, cardiovascular disease because my blood pressure went up. And then, on top of all that, I got into cancer. Okay, so let's keep going. No glycogen, too much pyruvate, overwhelm the mitochondria, liver turns all of it into fat. Some will get out, causes heart disease and obesity. Some will stay in, liver causes fatty liver disease and diabetes. That's the overload process of fructose metabolism in the liver. Okay? That's inspiring, isn't it? Isn't it fun to just study biochemistry and be like, well, dadgummit, I might as well just throw in the towel. No, you don't have to throw in the towel. All you got to do is just pay attention to what you're eating and just like, hey, look, I'm just going to cut out the fructose. I'm going to cut out the sugar. I'm going to cut out the high fructose corn syrup. I'm going to cut out the fructose. And I'm going to decrease my chances of having, what does it say right there? Heart disease, obesity, fatty liver disease, and diabetes. So I have these patients sometimes that'll come in and tell me they've got type 2 diabetes, but they don't have fatty liver disease. And I'm like, you don't understand how that works. You've got a problem with your liver. You may not detect it right now, but you've got a problem with your liver. And if you get fatty liver disease, what they're going to tell you, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, is you end up with this cirrhosing of the liver. You're going to have a transplant, or you're going to die. You might die early. It's a bummer. Trust me on that one. Okay, so let's look at the overload of this reactive oxygen species. What does that mean? You know, antioxidants and free radicals. Okay, antioxidants and free radicals. Eat your blueberries, because your blueberries are an antioxidant. Vitamin E is an antioxidant. Vitamin C is an antioxidant, right? Your strawberries, like your blueberries and your strawberries and your raspberries, your things that they have antioxidants. Because every time inside that mitochondria, every time you make an ATP, you also make a free radical. It's a 1-to-1 ratio inside. When we put the pyruvate into the mitochondria and we run it through the cycle and we come out with energy, we also come out with a free radical. And a free radical is damaging. It's reactive oxygen species, ROS is what it stands for in this particular slide. Okay, so now we're going to put fructose into the liver. The fructose is going to go into the mitochondria. It's going to go through the process. It's going to go into the pyruvate. It's going to hit that whole thing. And what are we going to get? We're going to get two things. We're going to get ATP and we're going to get reactive oxygen species. But then we're going to get too much of it, because we've got too much of it. Because we don't just drink 1 can of Coke, we usually drink 2, right? Maybe we drink 3. We don't just eat them by themselves. We have a Coke and a candy bar. How many times have we done that in our life? We stopped off at Town & Country, and we stopped in there and we got us a Coke and a candy bar. But after a while, we couldn't just get 1 candy bar. We got 2 candy bars. So we got a Coke and a candy bar and another candy bar, because the 1 candy bar just wasn't enough. That's the dopamine in the brain problem. So we overloaded it even more, right? So now when we overload that too much, it kicks it back out. Kicks it out, acetyl-CoA, there's your lipid droplet again. There's your fatty liver disease. That gets pushed down into junk. There's junk again. Fat deposition. And now we got this whole thing going. So now we've got all these reactive oxygen species going. We've got all this happening. So now what happens, we get this endoplasmic reticulum up there, and that has a specific job inside of the cell. And we have so many reactive oxygen species up there, we have so many free radicals, that we end up with this thing called UPR, unfolded protein response. And it's supposed to go in there and get all rolled up, but it doesn't roll up properly. And we get this ER stress, endoplasmic reticulum stress, can't fold insulin molecules or insulin receptor molecules. We can't package things the way they're supposed to be packaged. And what does that do? It sends a signal to tell the signal, okay, create apoptosis or programmed cell death. Let's kill this cell. Or it causes cellular or metabolic dysfunction. That's what happens when we have too many antioxidants in the endoplasmic reticulum. And we end up with this unfolded protein response. And in a couple days, we're going to go over Parkinson's. And we're going to get to one of the causes of Parkinson's. And unfolded proteins are on the list of things that might be contributing to Parkinson's disease. And it's like, wait a minute. Fructose metabolism, too much fructose could possibly be leading to Parkinson's. I'll show you that here in the future. We'll get to that shortly. So we got this ROS in the endoplasmic reticulum. We got this ROS that's coming from the mitochondria. Now we've got this inflammatory cytokine issue going on out there in our blood, and that's causing this whole issue. And we've got another set of ROS that comes in. And so we're supposed to clean all this out with our peroxisomes. We're supposed to get rid of all this stuff. So we've got this mechanism inside our cell that's supposed to work and clean it all out, but it's so overloaded that doesn't even work. Now we become insulin resistant because there's our junk, right? So or junk 1, and now we got insulin resistance, we got insulin receptor issues, too many ROS, not enough antioxidants, overloads the peroxisomes, and then just creates havoc in our liver. We're getting fatty droplets all over the place. We're getting inflammation. We're getting fatty liver disease. We're getting peripheral insulin resistance. We're getting too much glucose and too much insulin, which is driving the pancreas, which is causing the whole thing to go crazy. How's that? Y'all like, holy crap. Like, I hope you're thinking this. I hope it's like you're done with it. You're done with that kind of lifestyle. Once you see all this mechanism that's happening inside your liver, right? Okay, now let's look at a few other things. So we got that one. Got regular. We got hemoglobin. So what is hemoglobin A1C? Let's talk about that for a second. Okay? So we talked about that. It's like corn flakes and frosted flakes, right? It's like your red blood cell gets this glucose molecule hooked onto it, and now we can start to see how much glucose you've had in your bloodstream because of the damage that it's doing to your red blood cells. And it's a 3-month process. You've got this 3 to 4 month lifespan of your red blood cells, and so you can kind of tell how much of this is baked on there. And I just wanted to show you that, because there's a couple of steps that I wanted to show you. Okay, I wanted to show you this. I wanted to show you hemoglobin, and then glucose, and then how they bind together. And then you bind it. There's a process. It goes from one step to the next step, and maybe there's more steps in between, and then it goes one more step, and now you've got hemoglobin A1C. You've got hemoglobin and glucose stuck together as one molecule. Every time this happens, you throw off a reactive oxygen species, which has to be quenched by an antioxidant. So every time your hemoglobin runs into a glucose, your red blood cell runs into a glucose, now all of a sudden they bind, and now we're creating another free radical issue. There's another way that we create free radicals right there. Okay, and that's what hemoglobin A1C is in this process. All right, so now let's look at this. All right, let's look at, close that one and that one. There we go. Okay. Linear glucose, and linear fructose. All right. And you're gonna be like, okay, now why is he talking about this one? Okay, let me tell you why, and I'll show you how it works. You ever, what would be a good example? Like a spring, maybe. If you bent a spring and hooked it to itself, where it's like wound up together, you could have a spring, like an old trampoline spring, right? A trampoline spring is in a linear format. It's in a line. It's in a straight line. But if you were to take it and you were to wrap it around itself and hook those two hooks together, you could make it into a circle. Now, the tighter that circle, the more apt that spring is going to try to pop apart, right? So if you had a big, long spring, if you had a big, long spring and you bound it together, it's like there's not much tension in it. So the chances that it's going to pop open is very low. But if you have a shorter spring, a real strong one like on a trampoline, and you were to bend that, and you could bend it enough to hook it together, man, that dude, watch out, because that thing might pop, right? Okay, the difference, that's somewhat the same thing as the difference between glucose and fructose. And it has to do with the structures of those two molecules, and one of them has 6 carbons, and that's the glucose. And one of them has 5 carbons, and that's the fructose. And the 5 carbon is like the smaller spring. It's the fructose molecule, when you get it in a circle, when it binds up together, what happens is it's tighter. So you got this glucose molecule in linear form, and I know you guys on the radio can't see it, but you guys on Facebook and everything, you guys can see it. You got this glucose molecule in linear form. Then you've got this glucose molecule in the Haworth projection, which is in a circular form. You can kind of see how it fits together. So it can bind itself up in a circle. All those things can hook, those carbons all hook together, and you got this 6 carbon molecule, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with this oxygen hooked onto it, and it's all in a big circle. And 6 carbons molecule, it's easier to bind, and it doesn't have any sort of competing other little molecule at the top, so it's very stable. Every once in a while it breaks loose and it goes into a linear form, but not too often. It's rather stable. But fructose is not the same. Fructose is a 5 carbon molecule, and so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so when you put it in a tight circle, it's a little bit tighter. It has affinity to want to bust open. Okay? And when it has an affinity to want to bust open, another thing is it's got these 2 competing molecules. When you bind it together and hook it together, right at the top, it's got 2 identical molecules, and they're pushing against each other, like trying to put the 2 positive ends of a magnet together. So you put the 2 positive ends of the magnet together, they want to push apart, right? Well, this is what happens with fructose. You put these 2 up here at the top, you put this little part of the molecule and this part of the molecule. When you bend that, first of all, you got 5 carbon ring. It's a tighter ring, so it's already got this pressure on it, right? And now you got these 2 competing molecules that you're trying to push together. It has a tendency to break apart. And now we get it in the linear form. So now we've got glucose in the linear form in the bloodstream, and we've got fructose in the linear form in the bloodstream. Glucose doesn't do this very fast due to 6-member ring. About 0.08% of glucose is in linear form, which can bind to the protein, the hemoglobin, to cause HbA1c. Okay? Fructose is a 5-member ring, tighter wound. It has ionic stress. There's 2 hydromethyl groups, that's what I was talking about, butting heads, which causes this thing called allosteric interaction, and it wants to pop it apart. 3% of fructose will be in linear form. More fructose equals increased reactive oxygen species. It's 7 times faster and 100 times increase in free radicals. Okay? Because the fructose molecule is tighter, it will pop open 7 times greater than a glucose molecule will. When it pops open in linear form, it's going to bind with the hemoglobin and make hemoglobin A1c. So your HbA1c is 12. Your HbA1c is 11. It's 9. It's 10. It's supposed to be 5.6 or less. Right? We want it to be 5.6 or less, but when you test it in your blood, your HbA1c is 7 or 8. What is it saying that's happening to you? It's saying that if you're ingesting larger amounts of fructose, which is popping open into a linear form, which is 7 times more likely to be in that form, which is 3% of your fructose versus 0.08% of your glucose. Do you see the difference right there? So it's like, how would you decrease hemoglobin A1c? Decrease your fructose intake. It'd be simple. Decrease your sugar intake, decrease your fructose intake. You'd have less of it floating around. You'd have less of a chance of it binding. Then you wouldn't get that sugar connected to your blood cell, and then you could get that down. And everybody knows that the association between high hemoglobin A1C and all kinds of disease is there. You could decrease it. Hey, we've run out of time. We've reached the end of the show again. That's a lot of stuff. I know it. It's crazy. But I really do think it matters, and I really do think that if you just take a second, maybe you have to go back and watch this again, but just take a second and break this down, you can make yourself so much healthier just by understanding the difference between those two things. You guys have a great night. We'll be back tomorrow night at 6, and let me know if I can help you.